And we would like to call this meeting of the Provo Municipal Council to order. The date is Tuesday, March 16th at time is 5:34 p.m. This meeting will be conducted entirely via electronic means on February 25th, 2021, in accordance with Utah's Open and Public Meetings Act. I've determined that conducting meetings of the Municipal Council with an anchor location, such as the Municipal Council Chamber, presents a substantial risk to the health and safety of those who may be present there. These are the facts upon which I've made this determination. The World Health Organization has classified novel coronavirus disease, aka COVID-19, as a pandemic. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention state that COVID-19 is easily spread from person to person between people who are in close contact with one another. State Public Health Order 2021-5 addresses the ongoing COVID-19 public health emergency and establishes minimum standards to address the unique circumstances in different locations. Utah County is currently listed as having a high level at the time that this statement was written, now a moderate level of coronavirus transmission as determined by the state's transmission index metrics. Physical distancing measures will be difficult to set up and maintain in the Provo City Municipal Council Chamber and other meeting rooms. Additionally, the chair of the governing board of the Redevelopment Agency of Provo City, Shannon Ellsworth, has determined that its meetings are subject to the same risks and has adopted the same procedures as the municipal council. The meeting will be available to the public for live broadcast and on-demand viewing at youtube.com/Provo City Council. The council requests that attendees help maintain the decorum of the meeting by silencing electronic devices and being respectful to others. And please wait to speak until called on by the council chair. In the current situation where the meeting is being held via Zoom webinar and broadcast over YouTube, I remind you to turn off your mics when not speaking so as to minimize the potential for background noises and conversations to be picked up, recorded, and broadcast for all to hear. We have all council members present this evening, and along with the mayor and Deputy Mayor Paxman and Assistant CAO Dixon Holmes. Tonight, the opening prayer will be given by Mr. Shipley.
Our dear Father in heaven, we thank thee for an opportunity to meet. We thank thee for all the good people in this community that work so hard to serve us in the administration and those that are helping to keep us safe and to bring us services that we need as a community. We thank thee for their efforts, and please bless them as they do so. We thank thee for the progress that's been made against the pandemic, and we thank thee for thy influence and help within science to help the vaccination rollout and the process that's made so much good progress of late. We ask a blessing upon all of us that we can make good and wise decisions and that we can have thy help in contemplating the best path forward and the various decisions that we have to make. We thank thee for all that thou hast given us and say this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you, Mr. Shipley. The Pledge of Allegiance will now be provided by Mr. Fillmore.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We are now ready to receive public comment. Staff will play a short video explaining how interested persons can comment.
think Karen's having a moment of technical. There it is.
Karen, I think you need to share the system audio.
I was afraid I might do that. Hold on just a second. This is what happens when you scramble just a bit. Okay, we'll try this again.
There are three types of items for which public comment will be received. The first is the open public comment period. The council will allow up to 15 minutes for public comments on matters that do not appear on tonight's agenda. The second is for items that require a public hearing. For these items, time will be provided for all those who wish to speak. The third is for items on the agenda that do not require a public hearing. The council will allow up to 15 minutes for comments on each item. Because the City Council is meeting virtually using Zoom webinar, and this meeting is being broadcast on the Provo City Council's YouTube channel, we have enabled telephone access to receive public comment, the numbers for which will be shown on screen during the meeting. When a caller is connected, they will be required to enter the meeting ID and enter the pound sign. When asked for a personal ID number, enter pound. The caller will now enter the meeting as an attendee and will be able to hear the meeting while muted. Similarly, we have enabled access for persons wanting to connect via computer to the Zoom meeting. As attendees, you can raise your hand electronically at the appropriate times to comment when called upon. For telephone callers, when you wish to speak on an item being discussed, press *9 to raise your hand and then wait to be called upon. When called upon, press *6 to unmute yourself. Attendees will be called upon by the last 4 digits of the listed phone number or by the name listed. Please provide your name and city of residence before making your comments. You will be given up to 2 minutes to speak. A timer will be posted on screen, and the beep should be audible when your time is up. A reminder that there is a lag of approximately 30 to 60 seconds between the meeting and the broadcast. To avoid confusion, callers should mute the broadcast to hear the discussion in real time. The open public comment period starts now.
Okay, we have quite a list of people. If anyone in our list, we do have one with a raised hand. If anyone else is wanting to speak during the public comment portion, please make sure you raise your hand. If you're on the phone, you can do that by pressing *9. Brigham Daniels, go ahead, state your name and city of residence for the record, and you'll have 2 minutes to make your comment.
All right, I think I've unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you. And I'm not sure if you can see me, but I've got my phone up to my ear so I can hear you. So if you're looking into my ear, forgive me about that.
No, it's all audio.
Great. So my name is Brigham Daniels. I'm a resident of Provo. I live in the Tree Streets. I am calling in to comment on the agenda item tonight that deals with support for additional tools for the city to preserve open lands in Forest Service area and in the foothills. I am very much in favor of providing any sort of additional tools to the toolbox to preserve these lands. I believe that these lands are a big part of what makes living in Provo a wonderful, wonderful place. I think that they are enjoyed by many of us. They are something that should be preserved for our children and our grandchildren. And if there are things that the city can do, including this tonight, that allow to have that gives the city additional tools to deal with these problems or these challenges, I would be highly in favor of it. I thank you very much for listening to my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Daniels. And just a reminder, if you're here to comment on an item that is on the agenda, we would prefer at all possible if you were to hold the comment until we get to that agenda item. If you're not able to be with us for that at that time, then it's fine to comment here. But the primary purpose of this portion of the meeting is to comment on items that aren't on the agenda. Go ahead, Karen. Do we have another caller?
No one else. Well, we had someone put their hand down, so that must mean they're calling for, or they're in for a specific item. Last chance, anyone who wishes to speak during the open comment period. Otherwise, we will turn it back over to you, Mr. Sewell, and go to the first item.
Thank you. Item number 1 on our action agenda tonight is a resolution consenting to the appointment of individuals to the Parks and Recreation Board. And I'm showing that this item is to be presented by Mayor Kafusi. Is that right?
Yeah. Thank you, Council Chair Sewell. I'll take it from here.
Okay.
I am happy to present 3 new members to our Provo Parks and Recreation Board to work with Director Scott Henderson. Their names are Samantha Curtis, William Totai, and Larry Hunt. And I would ask that you would approve these appointments.
Thank you. Councilors, is there any discussion on the motion before us to appoint these individuals? If there is none, I will just once again express our appreciation to these 3 whom the mayor has just introduced for their willingness to serve on our wonderful Parks and Recreation Board. And I will call for a vote consenting to their appointment. Mr. Shipley.
Yes, and thank you.
Mr. Ellsworth. Sorry. Councilor Ellsworth.
Yes.
Mr. Fillmore.
Yes.
Mr. Hoven.
Yes, and thank you.
Mr. Hanley.
Yes.
Mr. Harding.
Yes.
And I too will, Dave Sewell will vote yes with my thanks as well. Thank you. Let's move on to action item number 2, which is a resolution consenting to the mayor's appointment of J. Brian Jones as the city attorney for Provo City. And this will also be presented by Mayor Kafusi.
Thank you, Council Chair Sewell. I would like to recommend that Brian Jones be appointed as the new city attorney for Provo. Mr. Jones has served as the interim city attorney since the retirement of our previous city attorney, Robert West, last year. So he's been working more than double duty. So I would ask for your consent on this.
Thank you. Councilors, is there any discussion on the motion? Councilor Ellsworth.
I just wanted to say I sincerely appreciate Mr. Jones's dedicated and intellectual and honest service to Provo City. He is a phenomenal colleague and asset to everyone in our community.
Hear, hear.
Thank you. Councilor Harding.
Thank you. As I said earlier, I can't think of a better person to be stepping into this new role. And Mr. Jones has served Provo well for many years and will continue to serve the people of Provo very well in this new role. He is near and dear to many of us, all of us, because of the role that he has served in as the attorney for the council. And I know that won't necessarily change immediately, but you know, this will cause some change, and that's hard to accept for us. But you know, you are I'm excited that you're going to be continuing to serve the people of Provo in a slightly different role. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there other comments from councilors? Well, let me just echo what's already been said. I am very grateful to have been able to serve with Brian these past 7+ years. Of course, he was here before I was. His service has been outstanding, and I very much enjoyed the association and appreciated his wisdom and his counsel on many, many occasions. If there are no further comments, I will call for a vote on this resolution consenting to the mayor's appointment of Brian to be our new city attorney. Councilor Harding.
Yes.
Councilor Handley.
Yes.
Councilor Hoban.
Yes.
Councilor Fillmore.
Yes, indeed.
Councilor Ellsworth.
Yes.
Vice Chair Shipley.
Yes.
And I, Dave Sewell, will also vote yes enthusiastically. Now, Brian, I see your hand up, and I was hoping maybe that you would want us to say a few words at this point.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Cliff just sent me a note and asked me if you were going to get me to cry. And I want to say thank you so much for that vote of confidence. I recognize it. I want to say that it's a bittersweet moment for me as well. It's been 10 years now since I first started working with the city council. Over 14 since I've been working with the city. The great thing about this step is that I still be at the city, and I'll still get to see all of you, and I'll still get to work with you. And I love Provo City. I love working at Provo City, and I love the opportunity to try to serve the citizens of Provo and look forward to continuing to do that. We talked earlier, I mentioned to Chair Sewell that I did just want to make a brief comment that although I am not a big follower of social media, I have been made aware that there have been some discussions on social media about what happens next with representation of the council. And I just wanted to say, first of all, obviously that's entirely within the council's hands. The council gets to decide that. And that's, one of the things I've fought for the last 10 years is to make sure that you get to decide the things that you ought to be able to decide. I will say, just so for the members of the public so that they're aware, that both state statute and city code actually assign the responsibility for providing legal services to the city council, specifically in our form of government, as well as the other forms of government, to the city attorney's office. And that's what happens throughout the state and in all the cities, including the cities that are in our form of government. That being said, my role as city attorney will be to provide the assistance to the council that they want in the way that they want it. And we've already begun to present to the councilors some options about how we could do that. And they have full control over what option they pick. And we, as the city attorney's office, will do our best to provide legal advice and support the council and the administration in our role as the city's attorneys as we go forward. And we'll see. That'll probably evolve over time, but we'll continue to be here, and I look forward to continuing to associate with you and working with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Brian. All right. I'm actually going to back up for a second. I didn't notice before agenda item 1, there was one set of minutes for us to approve. It's proposed that we approve the following minutes from our February 2nd, 2021 council meeting. Are there any objections or requested changes to those minutes? Seeing none, if there are no objections, I will declare the minutes approved by unanimous consent. And let's move on then to item number 3, which is a resolution authorizing the mayor to approve an interlocal agreement with Utah County to conduct a vote by mail election for the municipal primary and general elections to be held in Provo City in 2021. If any members of the public would like to give a comment for this item, they're encouraged to call in or sign in now. And this item will be presented by Amanda Erkenbrack.
Thank you, Chair Sewell and Council. I appreciate this opportunity. Also, I would just like to note that we do have Josh Daniels from Utah County on the line. He is available to answer any questions that might arise. And I want to just thank him for being available. It was kind of short notice, so thank you, Josh. So tonight, before you, we have a resolution that would authorize Mayor Kafusi to enter into an interlocal agreement with Utah County for elections. This is very similar to what we've done in years past. Before I get into that, I just wanted to kind of give you a brief overview of what the election will be like this year. Very similar to what we've seen the last couple of years. So it will be a vote by mail election. Ballots will go out about 3 weeks prior to the actual day. So the primary is August 10th. The general election is November 2nd. So ballots will go out at least 3 weeks before. We've had a great response from the community in actually returning those ballots to the drop box. I believe there's currently 21 drop boxes throughout the county, and I think 4 of those are in Provo, so that's great for us. We have plenty of drop boxes for our citizens. They have seen a great decrease in the number of people who want to come and vote in person and turn in their ballot in person. So rather than every city having an actual vote service center or polling location, they're just doing fewer centers located throughout the county. I did talk to one of their representatives earlier today, and it does sound like they plan to have one in Provo, which will be great. And then, of course, for the primary, it would depend on whether or not we have a primary. So, but they are doing a great job promoting the drop box. They also provide prepaid postage so people can return their ballots by mail. And then if someone does still want to vote in person, they can do so. They can go in and request a replacement ballot in person, or they can return their mail ballot in person. So there will be those limited centers. There is also an app, it's a mobile voting app called Votes, and that is available for disabled and overseas voters. People can go onto Utah County's website, learn more about that. So that's a great option as well. So with that, that's just a quick overview of the election and what we're looking forward to this year. As you know, we do have 4 seats available. We have council districts 2, 5, citywide 1, and mayor. So if any of you are interested in running again, or anyone listening would like to run, the declaration period is the first week in June 1st through the 7th. So stop by my office and we'll get you signed up. That would be great. John, would you please open up the supporting document from OnBase and share that? It should be labeled Exhibit 1. Perfect. So this is the agreement, very similar to what we've signed in previous years. If you would skip to page 8, the county has just outlined some of our responsibilities and their responsibilities. Provo City will still be responsible for candidates coming in and filing certain notices, keeping the candidates informed about their campaign finance reports. And the county is responsible for a lot as well. They're also, they're going to be programming the ballot, printing the ballot, mailing the ballot. They will arrange all the poll workers, security of the election. So there's a lot that goes into this, and that's outlined on pages 8 and 9 of the agreement that John has displayed. And then if you will go to the final page of this agreement, this is an estimate based upon the number of voters that we had as of January 4th. So the cap cost, or the maximum not to exceed, is $225 per voter per election. So for this year, it looks like that estimate is about $210,739.50. And And if there's any questions about that, I'd be happy to answer any questions about the election in general. And that's what I have for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for Amanda? Councillor Ellsworth?
Yeah, thank you, Amanda. I'm curious if a candidate has concerns about the fairness of a city election, maybe they feel that someone within the city is in some way influencing or disrupting an election, who would they report that to?
That's a great question. And in fact, I just realized that we have Amelia Powers Gardner on the line as well. She's our county clerk auditor, and she would be a great person to talk to. Her office has been amazing. So anyone could reach out to their office. I would be happy to discuss with them. So there's multiple resources. Just let me know and we'll arrange whatever they feel most comfortable with.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Hardy?
Thank you. I was trying to write down my questions and one escaped me before I could get to it. But I noticed earlier you mentioned if we have a primary, and then you also talked about the prepaid postage. If we don't have a primary, or also if people use those drop boxes, do we still pay for that prepaid postage, or is it we only pay for what is actually used? And if we don't have a primary, do we not? Do we basically pay the max would only be half as much?
If the council and chair agrees, I would love to have Amelia or Josh address that.
Sure.
Would that be okay?
You bet.
Amelia or Josh, would you just raise your hand?
Oh, I can raise my hand. There we go.
Okay. Amelia?
Yeah. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So you do not pay that postage unless it actually goes through. So we have an account with the post office and they meter those as they come through. And then we get charged only for the ones that have come through. And then if you do not have a primary, you do not get charged for a primary. Only if you actually hold a primary election do you get charged those costs.
Thank you.
Are there other questions, councilors? Mr. Harding?
I did remember what my other one was. I believe the practice of Provo City has been to appropriate or budget half the expense of running an election every year. That way, it just kind of evens out the budget. Is that what we did last year? And how much money did we set aside last year?
That is true. We budget about half every year. We will have enough. We'll have 85,000 approximately, give or take. I don't have the exact figure coming in with this next fiscal year. We won't get billed until after the election, so we'll be well into our fiscal year 22 budget. But with what we've had carry over from the previous year, and that will be okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, we'll open this up to public comment at this point. Karen, do we have anybody waiting for that?
Looks like we have one person already with their hand up. Just a reminder that you can hit *9 if you're calling in from your phone in order to raise your hand. If you're on the computer, there's a little raise hand feature. So caller with the number ending 6195, go ahead and unmute your phone. State your name and city of residence for the record, and you will have 2 minutes to make your comment. They haven't. Oh, there we go. Go ahead. Oh, and now they're gone. Okay. It wasn't me, I promise. I don't see any other hands up. I think we're fine to move forward. There was enough time to get on just with that technical issue.
Okay. Seeing no public comment, then we will close public comment and bring it back to the council for any discussion. If there is no further discussion, then I'll call for a vote on the implied motion. Mr. Harding,
Yes.
Mr. Handley,
Yes.
Mr. Hoban,
Yes.
Mr. Fillmore,
Yes.
Councillor Ellsworth,
Yes.
Mr. Shipley,
Yes.
and I, Dave Sewell, will vote yes as well. So the motion carries unanimously. We'll now move on to action item number 4, which is a resolution outlining support for the continued ownership and preservation of sensitive lands in the foothills and canyons by the Forest Service. And this item is to be presented by Councillor Handley.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is a resolution that is in response to a number of recent developments in the city, going back to the creation of a critical hillside overlay zone that provided some more rigorous standards for expectations for developments in the foothills to minimize the impact, and that has led to further conversations that in which we ended up creating the open space recreation zone that we have put on a number of city parcels throughout the city. And that too was in response to a growing concern, not only among us, but among the city about preservation of open space in the city generally, but in the foothills in particular as well. And then recently, the Utah Valley Trails Alliance proposed a draft of a plan for the city of Provo. They've been doing this for other cities in Utah Valley, and we wanted to know what the public opinion was about that in particular, because not only did it give us some template for thinking about how to improve and create new recreational opportunities within city boundaries, but also how to take better advantage of some of the open space in the possession of the Forest Service, for example, and how we might work in concert with the Forest Service and other entities to provide those recreational opportunities. So we thought it was a good idea as a city council to sponsor an open city hall for the draft plan of the Utah Valley Trails Alliance to get a sense of what the public feedback was on that. And the feedback was overwhelmingly positive. We had close to 500 responses, many comments, and overwhelmingly positive in favor of the plan. The plan has a lot of detail to it, and our concern at this point isn't so much deciding on those details, but we wanted to send a clear message especially to the Forest Service that we would like to be a partner in working with them to continue to keep those areas, especially areas up above Route 189 in Provo Canyon, south of the Route 189 there. Areas that are much beloved by our citizens and much used. The Bonneville Shoreline passes through there. Pole Canyon has a number of trails there, and the Utah Valley Trails Alliance has suggested some really fascinating and interesting plans for that area. And so we wanted to send a strong signal as a council, and we're very happy to have the support of the administration, the mayor as well, in this resolution, to just send that message to the Forest Service that we want that area kept open, and we want to work with them to find ways to partner in the ways that I've described. So that's we discussed this earlier. We've got the resolution in hand, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for Mr. Handley? Seeing none, we'll move on to public comment. Karen?
looks like we have a few. Kay Nelson, go ahead and unmute yourself. Say your first and last name and city of residence for the record, and you'll have 2 minutes to make your comment.
Great. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Good evening, Mayor and council members. I'm so grateful to be able to listen to you tonight, and what a joy it is to see this kind of a resolution on the agenda. It's I'm so glad to see it. It's definitely the right move for what the foothills and the canyons need. I love what Utah Valley Trails Association has in mind, and I think this resolution is the right thing, and that the Forest Service is the right partner to work with. So just want to throw my support behind this. I think it's a wonderful idea, and I appreciate all the work and effort that's gone into it to get it to this point. So hopefully this will help preserve some of the wonderful treasures that we have in the foothills and the canyons. Just really grateful for your efforts in this. So thank you so much. I'm from Provo.
Thank you, Kay. Okay, Craig Christensen, go ahead and unmute yourself. You will have, give your name and city of residence, and you'll have 2 minutes to make your comment.
All right, thank you very much. I'm Craig Christensen. I'm a resident of Provo, living in the Sherwood Hills area. And I just can't tell you how gratifying it is to see the city respond to just overwhelming desire of the neighbors that live here in Provo to have access to these trails. The Utah Valley Trail Association is such a wonderful concept, and it takes, almost takes, things like a pandemic for us to realize how fabulous these resources are, and maintaining open access, maintaining the ability for us to enjoy these incredible resources that are right here in our backyard. Other cities dream of this. And I'm so grateful that our city isn't just dreaming about it, but is actually doing it. I wholeheartedly support this resolution. The neighbors that I get a chance to talk to are so encouraged by the things the city is doing to maintain access, to maintain a stronger working partnership with the Forest Service. This is the right direction. Again, let me just express my appreciation to the mayor and the council. We appreciate your leadership on these and on these types of issues. This is such a critical issue at such an important time. And as one citizen, I would like to say thank you.
Thank you. Christina Davis, go ahead and unmute yourself, state your name for the record, and you'll have 2 minutes to make your comment.
Hello, I'm Christina Davis, and I thank you for hosting a virtual city council meeting so that we can all participate. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I just wanted to share what I have discovered from the citizens of Provo City. I'm the chairperson for Earth Day 2021 Slate Canyon South Fork, and we were concerned as neighbors about our Slate Canyon, and in meeting with people to put together events for Earth Day in behalf of Slate Canyon, we were so overwhelmed by the number of people who are grateful to Forest Service access and public lands that the event had to be split out and spread among 4 different months. You really should get to talk to all the people who are so enthusiastic about what access to the canyons and the foothills means to them and their families. And I just want to thank Provo City and the Parks and Rec Department, and for Mayor Kerfusi's office, and for Provo Kindness Week, and all the people who've made possible so many Provo citizens to join together when the Trails Alliance that Mr. Christensen mentioned brought trails to the forefront of people's minds. and they heard that there was an event that would further care for an area that gives access. The support was overwhelming, and if it wasn't a pandemic, the event would be so large, it would rival some of the other great events that Provo City has hosted. So please, thanks for your effort.
Thank you, Christina. Is anyone else wishing to speak? Please make sure you do the raised hand. If you're on the phone, you hit *9 and that will raise your hand for us. Merritt Norton, go ahead and unmute yourself, state your name and city residence, and you will have 2 minutes to make your comment.
This is Merritt Norton. I'm a citizen of Provo in the Tree Streets neighborhood. I just wanted to give my wholehearted support behind this resolution. We need to be partners with the Forest Service. I think oftentimes they feel totally disconnected from the community in some cases. And, you know, they're a very large landowner surrounding Provo City. And I think it's just super great, fully in favor of everything that the council's doing in the city in trying to preserve open space and preserve recreational opportunities for our citizens. So I'm just really in support of helping the Forest Service any way we can to protect the land surrounding Provo City. Thank you.
Thank you, Merritt. Caller with the last 4 digits of the phone number 7793. Go ahead and unmute yourself, state your name and city of residence, and you'll have 2 minutes to make your comment.
Bonnie Morrow, North Campview, and I just wanted to say that I support this resolution, and I'm thrilled and love that we're working with the Forest Service. And thank you so much to Mayor Kafusi, who spent countless hours going through this and meeting with the public in her office. And thank you so much for listening to the citizens of Provo. Thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie. Is there anyone else? Raise your hand now. Looks like we got through everyone, Mr. Sewell.
Thank you, Karen. We'll bring it back to the council then for any discussion. If there is no discussion among the council, then I will call for a vote on the implied motion, which as amended earlier today. Councillor Shipley?
Yes.
Councillor Ellsworth?
Yes.
Councillor Fillmore?
Yes.
Councillor Hoban?
Yes.
Councillor Handley?
Yes.
Councillor Harding?
Yes.
And I, Dave Sewell, will vote yes also. So the resolution passes unanimously. We will now move on to number 5, an implied motion on an ordinance amending the Provo City Consolidated Fee Schedule to set electric service rates for small cell installations in Provo. And if any members of the public would like to give a comment for this item, they're encouraged to call in or sign in now. And this item will be presented by Scott Bunker, our Assistant Energy Director.
Yeah, good evening, Council and Mayor. I thank you very much for your valuable time tonight. I really appreciate it. I apologize. Travis Ball, our director, is unavailable to attend this evening. And so you're left with me, kind of his cheap knockoff as his representation. I don't have the extent of electrical knowledge and wisdom that Travis does, but we really appreciate your willingness to consider this item for approval tonight. With that said, I have nothing more to add to what I think Travis has presented to you in a recently prior meeting. And so I'm just here to answer any questions that you may have. And in addition to me, I do have Clint Boyer, our much qualified lead meter technician, on attending with me also, and he can handle any technological questions that might arise as well. Thank you.
Do we have any questions for Mr. Bunker? Mr. Hardy?
Yeah, quick clarification. When Mr. Ball presented to us, he presented on two different items. I believe what we're considering tonight is just one. It's just the fee schedule for the small cell.
That's correct.
Correct. Yeah, thank you.
Are there any more other questions? If not, we will open this item for public comment.
We currently don't have any hands raised. If you are participating in the meeting, there's a raised hand feature if you're participating by computer. If you're on the phone, you can press *9 to raise your hand for us on the screen. It doesn't appear that anyone wishes to speak to this item, Mr. Sewell.
Thank you, Karen. In that event, we will close public comment and bring this back to the council for any discussion on the motion. Seeing no council discussion, I will call for a vote on the implied motion. Councillor Shipley?
Yes.
Councillor Ellsworth?
Yes.
Councillor Fillmore?
Yes.
Councillor Hoban?
Yes.
Councillor Handley?
Yes.
Councillor Harding?
Yes.
And I, Dave Sewell, will vote yes, making this a unanimous vote.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bunker. We'll now move on to item number 6, which is an implied motion on a resolution appropriating approximately $12,000 from general fund sales tax revenues to the Economic Development Division in the general fund for contractual sales tax increment post-performance payment to Days Market. If any members of the public would like to give a comment for this item, they're encouraged to call in or sign in now. This item will be presented by Keith Morey, our Director of Economic Development.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect. We talked about this item a couple of weeks ago in the work session, but just as in a summary, back in March of 2019, City Council, or Provo City actually entered into an agreement with Days Market to help them facilitate doing improvements to their retail location. And the agreement basically is structured so that if the owner of the business makes an improvement to the project, we make an agreement that we will give them a portion of the increased sales tax that they could potentially generate back to them to help them offset the costs of improving their location. So the Days Market agreement basically said that if Days Market spent $1.3 million, just a little bit over that, in improvements, that the city would share the increased sales tax that they generated. They've actually completed that work. If you haven't been to that location, you really should. It's a beautiful store. And since then, they have exceeded the base amount that was established when we entered into the agreement back then, and are entitled to the $11,979.76 that we have on the agenda tonight. So basically what the council is doing is, since we've already entered into this agreement and Days Market has performed their portion of it, we're just fulfilling our portion by amending our budget now that we can show that they have met the terms of the agreement and have exceeded the sales tax amount that they were generating before, and they're entitled to the amount that we have on the agenda tonight. So that's basically the basics of the agreement. If you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Do we have any questions for Mr. Maury? Seeing none, we'll open this up for a public hearing. Are there any members of the public that wish to speak to this item?
I don't currently see any hands up. Just a reminder, if you're participating by computer, there's a raise hand feature. If you are participating by phone, you press *9 and we'll raise a hand on our screen so that we can call on you. Hopefully, if anyone wanted to speak to this, they've had a chance to jump on. It's hard to give a lot of time. We know there's a little bit of lag in the broadcast, so if people are listening on the YouTube side, we want to give them plenty of time, especially on an appropriation item. I think we've let enough time pass now. I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Sewell.
Thank you, Karen. Seeing no public comment, we'll close the public hearing and bring this back to the council for any discussion.
Councilmember Sewell, if I could just make a follow-up comment. I'd like to thank the City Council and Provo City for the forward-thinking approach that I think this represents to stimulating business retention and business growth in our community. I mean, we don't have a lot of economic development incentive tools in the state of Utah that we can utilize, but I think this is a productive one that lets us share the increased sales tax that we generate to try to incentivize businesses to make these kinds of improvements to their locations so that they continue to grow and continue to benefit our community. And I appreciate Dave's Market, the efforts that they've made to stay in our community and be a beautiful store that I think is a great asset to that part of our town.
Thank you, Mr. Maury. Sounds like the renovation went very well for them, was very successful.
Yes, sir.
Are there any comments or questions from councilors? Mr. Fillmore, you're muted.
I would just add the comment that this is a great example of how tax increment financing can work to improve commercial district. It's just a spectacular improvement to the Days store and the complex there. It's a blessing to everybody in that neighborhood.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions? Seeing none, we will call for a vote on the implied motion. Councilor Harding.
Yes.
Councilor Handley.
Yes.
Councilor Hoban.
Yes.
Councilor Fillmore.
Yes.
Councilor Ellsworth.
Yes.
Councilor Shipley.
Yes.
And I, Dave Sewell, will vote yes, making this a unanimous vote as well.
Thank you very much, everyone. Days Market will be very excited.
Thank you, Mr. Maury. Now for item number 7, I'm going to ask Vice Chair Dave Shipley to conduct this since I'm the presenter on this.
Thank you, Chair. The next action item 7 is an ordinance amending Provo City Code regarding the hold times for electronic signs and sign size limits. It has a citywide application. And if any members of the public want to comment on this item, of course, we encourage you to call in now or sign in now to do so after the presentation. This will be presented by Chair Sewell, our council chair.
Thank you, Councilor Shipley. I have a copy of the ordinance here. Cliff or Elizabeth, is it better for me to screen share, or would it be better for you to pull it up on your end?
If you've got it ready, you can go ahead and screen share.
Okay. Let's try that. Let's see. Okay, just 1 second here. Probably just want to share the window. Okay. So, okay. All right, I think I've got it. All right, are you seeing an ordinance in front of you?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
It's the red line. It's the red line version of it. Is that the one you want?
Yes. So you've all you're familiar with this. There have been no changes to the proposal since we last discussed it. It did go to the Planning Commission, and I haven't had a chance to watch the proceedings yet, but staff informed me that the recommendation was unanimous. I believe it was 8-0, recommending approval. Am I correct on that, council staff? Did I get that right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I think what I'll do is, since we've talked about this so much, I'll just kind of briefly walk through this and just summarize the changes. So as we're walking through here, this first section is what we call the preamble to the ordinance. It basically lays out the case, the rationale for the regulation that we're proposing. And one thing we learned through all of our experience with the sign regulation is that that's actually important. If the city were to get sued, that we are supposed to have a reasonable and rational explanation for why we're regulating signage in the way that we are. And so that's what this first section is. And that, as I mentioned, is not changed since last time you saw it. Let's see, let's walk through here. So currently in the code, we have basically 3 areas of the city. There's residential zones where digital signs are not allowed. There are what I'm going to call short hold time areas that are predominantly commercial. Current code specifies a minimum hold time of 8 seconds in those areas. And the proposed change here is to increase that to 1 minute generally, with a couple of exceptions, and one of them being for businesses representing 20 or more tenants in an SC3 zone, in which case it would be 15 seconds. And the other exception is for signs that are adjacent to and facing the freeway. And then it would be 8 seconds to match current state standard for highways. So that's a summary of what's in this section. Minor verbiage change. Instead of high churn, we're calling it short hold time. And instead of low churn, we're calling it long hold time. So there's those changes here. We did add a couple of residential zones that had been overlooked in previous versions to the list of zones where digital signs are not allowed, and those are listed here. And then significantly, we've also proposed adding the downtown historic district. And that one was kind of interesting because We didn't really start out that way in the committee, recommending that, but it was, we just got feedback that a strong majority of the businesses downtown actually preferred it that way. And so we wanted to honor that request. Okay, going a little farther. There were a few changes to the streets that are designated as the short hold time, predominantly commercial areas. You can see them here. I don't think we need to go over every single one since we've done that before, unless you have questions. We've added a few. We've also taken a few off, and these were all based on staff recommendations. These are a couple that were taken off here, 1860 and most of South State Street would now become long hold time areas because they're not on the list. And then there's a couple down at the bottom here that staff recommended adding to the short hold time area list. Let's see. Okay, not getting into too much detail here. See, most of the rest of this is changed. This sentence is just a clarification of the intent with respect to the North University Avenue Design Corridor, that digital signs are allowed, and they have been for a number of years, but there was some question about the interpretation of the ordinance, so that is just a clarification. This section is not really a substantive change on the sizes permitted, but at the recommendation of staff, it cleans up the code and makes it a little easier to understand. Instead of having to interpret this graph, there's now a simple table that shows the allowed sign area based on the frontage of the lot. And the table does correspond closely to the original graph, but it's just simpler to understand. That's what all that is. Definition changes we've talked about. And this is an exhibit that pertains to the preamble. That is a reference of some of the studies that were cited in the preamble. So that is my overview. Do you have any questions for me?
Thank you, Chair Sewell. Any questions from the council? I guess you explained it well. Should we open it now to public comment then?
Yes, we
Karen?
currently don't have anyone with their hands raised. So I'll remind you that there's one raising, but I'll continue my reminder. If you're on the phone, press *9 to raise your hand. If you're on the computer, there's a raise hand feature. So Brandon King, go ahead and unmute yourself, state your name and city of residence for the record, and you'll have 2 minutes to make your comment.
I am Brandon King, owner of Auto Performance on 763 South University Avenue in Provo. I believe that especially the small businesses of Provo should be able to use their electronic signs that's had them for several years and use them how they choose, including full lamination. Especially, being a small business, we rely on these signs, and we've paid a lot of money for them, and that restricts how we can use them and help our businesses grow. So I hope you would reconsider guidelines on this.
Thank you, Brandon. Jeff Young, go ahead and unmute yourself, state your name and city of residence, and you will have 2 minutes to make your comment.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Fantastic. Distinguished members of the City Council and Mayor, my name is Jeff Young of Salt Lake City. Our company, Young Electric Sign Company, or YESCO, just celebrated its 100th year. And we serve literally thousands of customers in Utah County. And we're here today representing their interests. We are not in favor of further restrictions on electronic signs. And it is fascinating. We talked earlier in the work meeting, we were hearing about all this effort to redevelop and to ratchet down on a business's ability to advertise right now, in our minds, is a really bad idea. Our customers resoundingly support animations and shorter hold times and do not support these types of restrictions. In prior work meetings, years gone by, I had given the city, including Hannah and others, the federal highway traffic study that showed that sign glances were never exceeded 1.3 seconds, which is important because the Virginia Tech Transportation Institute's findings show that above 2 seconds is dangerous. So signs are only 1.3. Texting is 4.6. So texting is very dangerous. And it's unfortunate in the code that the federal highway study is not listed. Signs are not unsafe. And so the basis of this whole discussion, I would submit to the council respectfully, that you reconsider that. I went through 10 years of the state of Utah traffic studies, wherein they looked at 509,000 accidents, and not once was a sign a culprit in an accident. The way the code is lined up with different hold times in different areas is also very confusing for us and our customers. We thought we also read that there is a provision that grandfather signs over 8 years old. We think that the code ought to have incentives to upgrade, not disincentives to upgrade. So we ask you to vote no on this code. It's bad for business and at a very bad time in the wake of COVID. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Okay, caller with the number ending in 3756. Go ahead and unmute yourself on the phone. That's *6. State your name and city of residence, and you'll have 2 minutes to make your comment.
Hi, thanks. James Carpentier, Mesa, Arizona, here on behalf of the Utah Sign Association. Honorable Provo City Council, I really appreciate the opportunity to address the council. We have found that the brightness of electronic sign regulation really is the most important regulatory aspect of this technology. And we do understand, based on the last meeting at the commission, that there are some electronic signs in the city that are in fact too bright. A longer hold time will not result in any difference to the appearance of an electronic sign that is too bright, as they will still be too bright. We strongly recommend that the code be enforced rather than to enact longer hold times as proposed. The proposed ordinance provides more favorable treatment for outdoor advertising or billboards because their hold time is 8 seconds. Therefore, we recommend that the city maintain the existing 8-second hold time for on-premise signs, since this is not the right time or place, as Jeff has just indicated, for more restrictive hold times on the business community and others. In fact, we believe that more flexibility in messaging to the public is needed in these changing times. And in the line in the preamble statement, it states that Provo will be open for business. This is not being more open for business, this proposed ordinance. Lines 39 and 40 state that crash risk increased by 2.8 times when a driver eyes leave the road for 2 or more seconds. And Jeff pointed out the 2013 Federal Highway Administration study showed the hold times were at 1.3 seconds. And I just want to add, too, that there's about 38 states that have this technology with signs that have a much lesser hold time than 8 seconds, probably in the 3 to 6 second range, and they have proven to be safe throughout the country. Line 141 to 143 exempt signs built prior to 2013. We think that'll be difficult to enforce and confusing for users, and it's a real problem. So I appreciate your consideration of our recommendations. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Okay. Last chance for anyone wishing to speak. Ryan Young, go ahead and unmute yourself, state your name and city of residence for the record, and you'll have 2 minutes to make your comment.
Thank you very much, council members. Ryan Young, also with YESCO of 1349 South, 500 East, American Fork. I'm here actually to read a letter on behalf of one of our good customers and a business constituent in your community who was unable to attend today, but sent this letter in to you earlier this afternoon. So the letter reads, Dear council members, it has been brought to our attention that the city is considering some material changes to the current sign code relative to electronic message centers, EMCs, which, as we understand, would be unfavorable to businesses with EMCs. We urge you to consider the position of businesses as you consider these changes. A company will make a considerable investment efforts to procure an optimal location wherein to maximize exposure and accessibility to the public for their services or products. With signage being a key element of that effort, by limiting further the functionality of EMC signage, a very dynamic and effective way of communicating to potential clients and customers, the city will directly hamper and frustrate businesses that have and will invest considerably into this communication channel. Clearly, no entity wants to endorse EMC usage that may be unsafe to the general and traveling public. The extensive studies and statistical data provided by the sign industry reflects defensible and appropriate parameters for usage of EMCs and how they may be used in a safe and reasonable manner. We encourage you to take under serious consideration their perspective and input as you consider any changes to how EMCs may be used. Specifically, I refer to the letter dated March 8th to the Mayor and City Council from the Utah Sign Association. Thank you for understanding how important EMC signs are for businesses and their effectiveness for communicating important messages. We endorse the safe and regulated use of EMCs and recommend collaboration with businesses and those in the sign industry as you consider changes to the sign code. Kind regards, Kirk Rogers, Vice President of Facilities and Property for Utah Community Federal Credit Union. And thanks.
Thank you. Caller with the last 4 digits, 4011. Go ahead and unmute yourself and state your name and city of residence, and you'll have 2 minutes to make your comment.
Hello, this is Paul Evans. I live in Provo City, and just going forward, I just need to clarify a couple of the signs that already exist along the North University Avenue design corridor. There's a sign at Jiffy Lube that has a scrolling reader board on it. There's a sign at CCC Bank that has clock and weather and animation on it. There's, of course, a sign at Blue Rock Medical and a sign at Esquire, both one of which moves more rapidly than than 3 times a day, and the other one has animation on it. And I just want to clarify that going forward, that there'll be no animation on the signs in that corridor, and that there will be hold times of at least an hour for each one of those signs. So, thank you.
Okay, it looks like we are done, Mr. Shipley.
I was just going to ask if we saw anybody else there. Okay.
No.
If there aren't further comments, we'll go ahead and close the public comment period and move back to the council for discussion. Questions or discussion to start with from the council? And maybe while we're queuing that, just a reminder that this is the first time that we've heard this after the Planning Commission sent this forward. And so any council member can have this continued by request during this meeting. Councilor Harding.
Thank you. I have a quick question and then kind of a deliberation. So my understanding is that this proposal would reduce the hold time in some areas of the city and increase the hold time in other parts of the city. If someone just, kind of ballpark estimate, how much of the city is it increasing the hold time, and how much of the city is it decreasing the hold time?
Chair Sewell?
Javin, if he's here, might be able to give us a better estimate, or a member of staff who did the driving around. Do we have a staff member here who could address that? If not, I'll give it my ballpark. Are you seeing a staff member here? Okay. There he is.
Gavin's here now.
Let me just pull up the map so I can verify exactly, but give me just one moment, please.
I apologize for not giving a heads up on this question. I didn't think about it until I was listening to the public comment.
That's okay. Mr. Harding, maybe while he's pulling that up, you had a comment as well?
Yeah, I've discussed this before, and sometimes I even forget some of the things that were discussed. So I apologize if this has already been answered. But my recollection is previously that the council, I think sometimes when we're compared to other communities, people don't appreciate this aspect. But pretty much we authorized digital signs anywhere the backlit signs are allowed. And so I think in some ways, we're actually quite liberal on where we allow digital signs. And we do have a good portion of the city that right now has the legal ability to change those signs 3 times a day. And we're moving that to once every hour, which is a significant increase in how often those signs can change. One other aspect is, we have these charts, graphs that show how large signs can be. And my understanding from comments made by staff in the past is these signs, if you have, say, 40 square feet, you don't have to have one 40 square foot sign. You can have multiple signs that add up to that 40. And so my one concern that I don't recall has ever been fully fully addressed, or I still don't know exactly what the answer is for this concern. But my concern is if a property has multiple signs on their building, potentially even multiple signs, freestanding signs and whatnot, if each of those can change, either the once an hour or once whatever the shorter hold time, I believe once a minute, then if they have multiple signs, if they're changing at different times, you could have a lot more sign changes. And I believe when I've brought this up in the past, it was asked that we focus on these proposed changes and then come back with and address this other question at a future time. And I'm okay with moving forward with that, but I would like to if that's the answer, then I would like to see us come back with a way to address what happens if there are multiple signs on the same property for the same location. Just I do have concerns about some unintended consequences with that. And I mean, it seems like a simple solution would be to limit the number of signs that can change. So if it says if they're in a short hold time period and a sign can change every minute, maybe only one of their signs, maybe one per block. Anyway, whatever the details are, but just to avoid the kind of the multiple signs changing at different periods to have an effect that's much more obtrusive than what is intended by this law.
Thank you, Harding. Mr. Weaver, thank you for helping us out on this.
Yeah, of course. Just to answer a couple questions that Dave brought up, we do limit the number of signs that can be there. They would be limited predominantly to just one monument sign or one wall sign, etc. The only zone I believe that can have additional street frontage signs would be, I believe, SC3, and they have to be a certain distance separated between each sign. So it is already limited to how many signs they could have. So if they could have potentially 100 square foot of a sign, but they choose to have a smaller sign, they're limited to the amount, the quantity of signs they could still have. So they would still be allowed to only have one of that type. That answers that question. A second, we're actually adding locations within the city that would allow signage, electronic signs within the city with this current proposal. We're extending it a little bit East Bay, up in the Riverwoods area and along Graber Lane. So and on 820 North slightly. So we are adding additional locations. Some of that would be either their recommendation of a long or short hold, but we are adding some additional signage in the city that we did not have before.
As a follow-up to that, Mr. Weaver, and to Councilman Harding's point, is there any sense of how much just generally is moving one way or the other? I mean, I think that's what he was trying to get a sense of is this making our sign policy in Provo much more restrictive generally, or is it kind of neutral, or what would you say to that as far as how much is moving one way or the other on hold times?
I think it's making it, regarding the hold time, a little less restrictive in some areas because we are extending the long hold down from 3 times a day down to 1 time per hour. So a lot of the areas of the city that are not within this short hold area will actually have a lot more opportunity for the sign to change on a more frequent basis. The other areas that are being changed from the 8-second to the 15-second, that is slightly a little bit of a higher limit. However, it is safer for the current vehicle, for the drivers on the roadway, et cetera. So we're looking at public safety in that sense for this.
Thank you. Mr. Fillmore.
Thank you, Mr. Shipley. I just had a question. I'm assuming, because this has been under study for so long, that the sign committee and the staff that worked with the committee has taken a look at the National Highway Safety Standards and studies that were alluded to by one of the prior commenters. Is that a fair assumption that that was considered in working through this new ordinance?
Yes, Hannah Salzar did the research primarily regarding this for what was safe regarding these, and we're trying to do the best practices reflecting that for the community.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Hoban.
Thanks. I was just going to comment on my impression of the net impact. So I think if you were to ask businesses that are moving from 3 times a day to 1 time per hour, they're going to feel much more benefit out of this. And there's more parts of the city that impacts than the 8 to 15 seconds. So my feelings are that we have to balance aesthetics, public safety, a lot of different factors. And, we all know the cities where you drive through them and it's just signs everywhere and they're super bright. And I can see them from my house, even though they might be in an adjacent city. We don't want to become that. We have to have some regulations, some restrictions. I'm sorry, it's just, we have to. And this is a good balance to me. And in summary, the net impact, much less restrictive. I think that those that are going from every 8 seconds to every 15 seconds are going to feel much less pain than those that are going from 3 times a day to once per hour are going to see a benefit, if that makes sense. The benefit far outweighs the negative in my mind. We're balancing, all these different factors. We're going from basically 8, every 8 seconds, every 15 seconds for some signs, but then the vast majority out there are going to be moving to once every hour, which is much more reasonable in my mind. And I think that's a good accommodation for most signs that are, closer to residential areas and such. So anyways, I think it's a net benefit. If I were the sign, the sign lobby, I'd probably be doing what they're doing, which is, pushing back on anything that seems restrictive, but I don't know if they realize that this is a net benefit to them overall. So that's my impression.
Thanks, Councilor Hoban. Chair Sewell.
A couple of comments. I'll try to address a few of the comments that have been made. There was a question raised about grandfathering by one of the residents who spoke up. Currently, as this is proposed, signs that are currently in effect would not be affected by this. So if somebody has a digital sign that changes faster than once a minute or once per hour, if they already have it before this law is passed, they would be grandfathered in. There was also a comment made about animations, wanting to have that. Currently, animations on digital signs are not allowed anywhere in the city by current code. I see Brian Jones' hand up, so I think I'm going to pause for a second to see if he has a correction or clarification on any of what I was saying.
Thank you, Chair. So I wanted to clarify about the grandfathering issue.
Oh, yeah.
It's not that signs currently in existence are grandfathering, because this is not the brightness standards and the hold times are not land use changes. So we're not talking about non-conforming uses under land use decisions. Those two specific provisions are included in our business licensing provisions, and so they apply to every business and apply in order for them to be able to qualify for a business license. So the only grandfathering that takes place is what's specifically mentioned in the code. And the one thing I want to make sure everyone's clear about, because that was brought up in some of the comments, is that's not a new part of the ordinance. That already exists. There is already a provision in the code right now that says that the brightness and hold time standards do not apply to electronic display signs that were in operation prior to 2013. And so that continues to be the case. So the same signs that are already that those standards already don't apply to, it will continue to not apply to, but otherwise nobody's grandfathered.
Thank you for that clarification. Yeah, I had actually forgotten that, so I appreciate that. This code is split into two sections. The part in the zoning section is where grandfathering would apply, and not the digital hold times in the business licensing section. So thank you for correcting me on that, Brian.
Yes.
Let's see. Federal highway study was mentioned. I just wanted to touch on that briefly. We did look at that, and frankly, there are conflicting studies out there. As in a lot of things, you can find some studies that will say that digital signs are perfectly safe, and they can't find any evidence that they cause accidents. Other studies have shown that they do attract longer glances, and that some of those glances do go more than the 2 seconds that is considered the upper limit of what is safe for a driver's eyes to be off the road. The other thing about the highway study is even that study concluded that it's best and safest to not have animation, and to not have a sign that changes so fast that a driver passing sees more than one message change. And so that's kind of where the 8 seconds come from, is if you're passing a sign at freeway speed and it changes every 8 seconds, you'll probably see at most just one change. And even this study says you really don't want to be seeing multiple changes as you go by. The observation that the sign committee has is that we just feel it's not appropriate to adopt the same standard in a city environment as on a freeway, because drivers are driving slower, for one thing. And so by that same logic that the federal highway standards use, the minimum hold time should be longer in the city to achieve the same effect. The other difference is that on the freeway, the signs tend to be few and far between. So you're usually just encountering them one at a time. Whereas in the city, you may see, particularly as digital signs proliferate, you may see 3 or 4 on one side and 3 or 4 on the other. And we were concerned about the effect of sort of the popcorn effect of seeing multiple message changes, particularly on both sides, possibly on both sides of the road. So those were kind of the factors that we felt argued for a longer minimum hold time, even in predominantly commercial areas, and that's why we settled on the 1 minute, with some of the exceptions that were already discussed. Now, in the other areas of the city, we're not arguing that there's a traffic safety impact on the long hold times. It's just for aesthetic reasons for not only drivers, but pedestrians, cyclists, and just people who are shopping or visiting a business or working in a business, to not have too many distractions from signs changing a lot. So that was the rationale there. And as was pointed out, we're actually going the other way on that one, because what we're proposing is less restrictive. It's coming down from 3 times a day to once an hour, and that will affect more signs in the city than the other change would. And then one last comment I'll make is, well, 2, I guess. We don't think the comparison to billboards or outdoor signs is a good one. Why are you regulating them differently than on-premise signs? Well, we don't even have the ability to regulate those billboards for the most part. Those are regulated by the state, and so we just don't have jurisdiction on those generally. The other comment I wanted to make is I feel like we really are trying to be pro-business here. There's a lot of cities that, the residents just, for a variety of reasons, don't like digital signs, and, the brightness, we agree, is probably the biggest issue, and we're going to take another look at that. But we were trying to accommodate more places where we could have digital signs and not have them be obnoxious to the residents. And so that's where we came up with this idea of the long hold time. One of the alternatives, if we can't make that work, is to go back to the way things were several years ago, where there were large areas of the city where, including mixed use areas with businesses, where digital signs just weren't allowed. And so, there's no perfect balancing act. I understand that. We have competing interests, and I understand that, but we're trying to strike a balance between something that will work for our businesses and that will also work for our residents and the type of community that they would like to have. So, thank you.
Mr. Sewell. Mr. Harding.
Thank you. So, like I said, I'm comfortable voting on this evening. If I have reasonable assurance that we'll at least look into the concern about multiple signs changing on a single property for a single business. And I absolutely could be wrong on this. I may be missing something that's just that's really obvious, or something that isn't as obvious, but I'm still missing it, and my concern is unfounded. I totally understand that. What Mr. Weaver explained, I think that would be great but I do need to understand that a little bit better because in my experience, that hasn't been the case. And again, we may be talking about different things here, but just I think I was on the council when this conversation was going on, and I remember Carpets America being the business that we were talking about at the time when they were looking at some remodeling renovation that they were going to do. So I pulled up Street View really quickly, and I'm counting 6 different signs on their building facade. And again, we might be talking about different things, but I guess my concern is at least right now, my understanding is these are backlit signs that could be converted to digital. They're not now, but our law would allow them to be converted to digital signs. And then if that's the case, if each of these 6 signs are churning, that's my concern, and so as long as we're willing to have that conversation, and maybe I just need to be needs to be explained to me why this isn't what I think it is, or it's not the concern that I think it is. That's perfectly fine. But that is my one reservation on voting on this tonight is this issue being outstanding. But I'm willing to go forward with it as long as I feel comfortable that we will address it in the short term.
Hey, Mr. Harding. Mr. Sewell, do you want to respond to that? I think we're asking for an assurance going forward that something will be addressed. I think, we might as well speak to that.
Sure. The council sign committee has looked at that. We felt pretty comfortable that the current code does provide reasonable limits on the number of signs per business, and so we didn't feel like we have a problem. But I mean, I'm happy to do a virtual breakfast with Councilor Harding, and if we can drill down and find a deficiency in the code somewhere, we're very, very happy to take another look at it.
Thank you.
Other comments from the council? And just a reminder, this is the first meeting for this, so if anybody would like to continue it, we can continue it. Call for comments before we vote. Mr. Harding, did you have an additional comment?
No, I just didn't lower my hand, sorry.
I'm probably supposed to do that for you. I apologize. Mr. Sewell.
I'll defer to Mr. Hoban first.
Oh, well, thanks. I think I just wanted to address the Provo being open for business comment. And I personally feel like we're trying to still be business friendly and balance the various needs. And I know I kind of said that already, so I guess I don't really need to repeat myself, but I just think this council has, from my experience, has been very cognizant of businesses and how things are going to impact businesses. And so, I just would hope that the business community would understand that all the things we're doing with TIFs and redevelopment, and I mean, we are trying to be business friendly. This is just one thing we have to balance, and we can't do it all, right? I mean, we also have residents, and we have residents who want us to have balance, things such as aesthetics and safety and things like that. So, I hope that those who feel like this move would be something that's not business friendly, would just look at the overall kind of culture on our council of approving things that have really benefited businesses. So, and I think we'll continue to do that. And we definitely don't want to put any businesses out of business. And we understand, things have been tough with the COVID year and such. So I hope that some of the other things we're doing to spur economic development will outweigh, any negatives the impact that some might feel due to do this sign ordinance changes.
Thank you, Mr. Hoban. Chair Sewell.
So I would really love to vote on this tonight, but our original sort of intention with the two hearings was that if something was non-routine or at all controversial, that we would allow the two public hearings. So I feel like I probably should ask for that.
Is that a formal request to continue?
Yeah, that's a request for a second public hearing. Yeah.
Okay. Was there any other comment before we close than this particular item?
Well, oh, sorry. I'll raise my hand.
Yes, Mr. Hoban.
Usually when we continue something, we have an objective to achieve in the meantime. So I guess I'd ask the Chair Sewell, who's also the chair of the committee, what are we going to focus on in the next 2 weeks? I mean, that's not a facetious question. I'm genuinely asking what will be the kind of the objectives over the next 2 weeks.
Well, I actually agree with the representative from the Utah Sign Association that brightness is probably the biggest issue that bothers people the most with digital signs, and so I would like to make that the focus of our next committee meeting. I don't really have anything else to discuss on this other than just giving the public and businesses a second chance to weigh in on it.
Okay.
Any other comments before we close the item? Okay, Chair Sewell, it's back to you.
All right, thank you for filling in for me on that item, Vice Chair Shipley. Appreciate it. That brings us up to item number 8, which is a resolution, an implied motion on a resolution transferring $1.9 million from the Legacy CIP Fund to various funds and appropriating the transferred funds for the purposes described herein. If any members of the public would like to give a comment for this item, they're encouraged to call in or sign in now. And this item will be presented by Budget Officer David Mortensen.
Thank you, Chair Sewell. So just to give a little bit of background on the item for those that maybe haven't been following it, those in the public. A month ago, February 16th, in a council meeting, the council approved the transfer of just over $7.7 million into a brand new Legacy CIP Fund. The funds in that account are meant to be used for legacy projects that will be a benefit to the city residents for many years. So we're looking for long-term impacts with these monies. At the time, the council also appropriated $3.9 million of those funds to be used for the Fire Station 1 relocation, as well as improvements at the airport terminal. And that left just under 3.9, a little over 3.8 million in the Legacy CIP Fund that's unappropriated. So this request is for a transfer of $1.9 million of that unallocated, unappropriated funds from the Legacy CIP Fund into various funds. 1 million of that would be going into the Parks CIP Fund, and then 900,000 would be going into the Economic Development CIP Fund. And then the resolution would also be appropriating $1 million from the Parks CIP Fund for Canyon Road Park, and then $900,000 in the Economic Development CIP Fund for West Side Grocery Incentive. That's all the comments that I have. So I'm happy to answer any questions. We also have Mayor Kafusi, Deputy Mayor Paxman, and Assistant CAO Holmes are here to answer any questions you might have.
Are there any questions for Mr. Mortensen or other members of the administration? Mr.
Chair?
Henley.
Yes, thank you. My question is, my question is about the 900,000 for the grocery incentives. Can you? I know we've talked about it before, and I think Mr. Parker had addressed this question quite a while ago, and now I can't remember. And I don't know if the details. I don't even remember the details, but maybe they've changed or haven't. I don't know. But the question I had posed was, you know, do we know for sure that we need that much money? And if so, if we appropriated this amount, I'm assuming that we would use what, you know, of course we wouldn't be obligated to spend it all if we didn't think $900,000 was necessary for something like this. Am I thinking along the right lines there?
Do you want me to answer that, David? I'm happy to take it.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor.
I saw your face and I thought, I'll take this one. So you're right, Council Member Handley. The 900,000 was basically an amount we came up with because, as you know, since day one, I have been fighting so hard to get a grocery store on the west side. It's been my number one goal. I have focused on it every year. I've pushed. I've started holding. I put together a task force. I'm holding weekly meetings, really pushing forward with this. So what that money would do would just give me something, and we already are in conversations. But to have that kind of like in a back pocket to help move it along would be a game changer. But with that said, I am fine. I just wanted you to know and everyone to know that I've been fighting really hard for a grocery store and working really hard, making it a priority. But if the council chooses to not put it under economic development, then that's fine as well too. I understand it's your choice, and I'll support whatever you decide.
Thank you. Yeah, so I mean, I would assume that if you know, in the end you used half of that or whatever, then we would have a further conversation about reallocating those funds for, you know, something else.
Absolutely. And I don't know, Deputy Mayor Paxman might want to just chime in because he's been in all those conversations along with me.
Yeah, that's right. It's been an ongoing desire of the West Side, obviously, to have a grocery store. But to answer your question, yeah, if the money was not used for that end, and it could be sewer infrastructure, it could be any number of things, it could be incentives, but it might just be. But it just really puts the economic development team and the mayor's office in a different position to have these discussions and push this forward. So that's the desire, is to be able to accelerate the discussion and have that wiggle room. If it's not used, we can't spend it on something else. We'd have to come clear it with council. So yeah, that's the idea.
Thank you.
Councilor Ellsworth.
Yeah, I may be mistaken. I thought there was an email that we got in the last 24 hours that said if we allocate this money and all of the 900,000 isn't used for the grocery store incentive, that it would not come back to the council, that it could be allocated for a different kind of incentive. So I'm getting, maybe I'm mistaken, but someone could clear that up for me. Is this where the administration could spend half of it and then we have a new conversation, or it's already allocated, it's outside of the council's hands and it can be used, the excess could be used wherever?
That's a great
specifically question. This 900,000.
Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks, Council Member Ellsworth. I never saw that email. I never sent that email. So this is the first time I'm hearing about it. Did someone else? Okay, go ahead, Isaac, because maybe you've heard about it.
Well, I'll just read to you from Wayne Parker, who we all wish were here for all these meetings. Let's see. If we don't need the funds for attraction, incentive, or infrastructure associated with the store, they can't, CAN''T, be moved to other projects without council approval. So that was his weigh in.
Okay. No, that's helpful. I was somehow I was thinking it could go to different economic development projects, but that's helpful. Thanks.
Are there other questions for the administration before we open up the public hearing? All right, let's open this up for public comment then. I think I neglected to mention earlier, if any members of the public would like to give a comment for this item, you're encouraged to call in or sign in now. And I'll turn this over to Karen to manage the public comment.
Thank you, Mr. Sewell. We do have a few raised hands. I'll just mention, if you're on the telephone, press *9 to raise your hand. If you're on the computer, there's a raise hand feature. So the first person who raised their hand was Sharon Mehmet. Go ahead and unmute your phone, state your name and city of residence, and you'll have 2 minutes to make your comment.
Hi, my name's Sharon Mehmet, and I live in Provo on the northeast bench, relatively close to where the Rock Canyon Park would be. And so my comment would sort of be along the lines of Councilor Handley's comment about how would that $1 million be spent. We're curious if that means a bigger, better, or sooner park, or where exactly that money goes. Obviously, none of us want to turn down money that we're offered to get this park going sooner or even better. But as was presented in the Parks and Recreation's presentation at your last council meeting, when we lost our Banús Park 2+ years ago, we no longer have any coverage, any easy access, I guess would be the best way to put it, to a neighborhood park. So I'd appreciate answers on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Next is Jennifer Griffin. Go ahead and unmute yourself, state your name and city of residence, and you'll have 2 minutes to make your comment.
Hi, thanks. My name is Jennifer Griffin. I live in Provo. I wanted to say I'm all in favor of the park. I think it's wonderful and so great for the city of Provo and us who live there to always have more green spaces for us to enjoy. Utah is one of those unbelievably beautiful places where being outside is just magical almost every day of the year. So I am in full support of any park anywhere. And also I wanted to say thank you, Mayor Kafusi, for pushing for a grocery store on the west side. I think that that's an amazing thing that would benefit people over there and also encourage businesses to grow. So thank you so much for your efforts. And I just want you to know that they're very much praised, and we're happy that you're doing such a great job. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, caller with the last 4 digits, 0851. Go ahead and unmute your phone, state your name and city of residence for the record, and you'll have 2 minutes to make your comment.
Hello?
Yes,
Hello.
we can hear you.
Okay. Hi. This is Rachel Luke. I live in Provo, and I just wanted to call and offer some support for the park being on this funding as well. I wrote an email, but it probably came a little late for some of you to read over. So just some thoughts that I have are that this funding came, a lot of it, as far as I'm aware, came about because of COVID. So it's nice to see something that has some relation to helping with mental health and those who might be short on funds, right? There, for the park, there's no upfront costs for the user. It's an opportunity to be outside, to take your family somewhere free that offers some recreational use. So in my mind, parks are an essential amenity, and cities are really greater for making parks a priority. I mentioned in the email that Timpview High is only a block or 2 away, so that's public green space for half of Provo's use that will be utilized. these funds also open up the backlog of other projects that need funding. So there's lots of indirect benefits for those who might not come and use this particular park. Hopefully that means that they can have their green space projects prioritized sooner. Anyways, I love this whole project, not just the park, but all the things that have been put on the roster. I'm so grateful we didn't follow Draper's footsteps and just do gift cards or whatnot. I'm so grateful that we're doing legacy projects that will have lasting impact for the residents of Provo. Thanks.
Thank you, Rachel. If any of the other people who are on the line wish to speak, make sure you raise your hand and let us know. Caller whose number ends in 2714, go ahead and unmute yourself, state your name and city of residence for the record, and you'll have 2 minutes to make your comment. You'll need to press *6 to unmute your phone.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we've got you.
Hey guys, sorry that took me a minute. I'm all for the park. I'm so excited it's going in. We've been waiting for it for so long. I'm starting to think I'm going to die before it gets here. And the fact we don't have a grocery store on the west side blows my mind. I was going to buy a house over there and I didn't buy it because there was no grocery store. And I have a friend who moved out she lived down by Seven Peaks and moved out because she said it was too hard. There were no grocery stores and it took too long to get everywhere. And I don't know, I think that's poor planning. So I love you, Mayor Kafusi. Thank you. Keep up the good fight.
Ma'am, can we get your name and city of residence for our records?
Ann Allen, I live in Provo.
Thank you. Anyone else? Last chance to raise your hand and make a comment. Bonnie, go ahead and unmute yourself and state your name and city of residence again for the record, and you'll have 2 minutes to make your comment.
Bonnie Morrow, North 10th View. And we just want to say that, first off, I've been watching the grocery store on the west side try to get in, and I'm thrilled that you guys are working on it. Thanks to Mayor Kafusi for all her time and effort to get this through. And then also green spaces. We've been fighting for them up in the Northeast area for a long, long time. And we appreciate council considering that we're going to preserve more green space by putting this park in. And we're just grateful for anything that you guys can give us to preserve green space. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Bonnie. Anyone else? I don't see other hands going up, so I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Karen. So since there's no further public comment, we'll bring it back to the council for any further discussion on the motion. Mr. Harding.
I don't always have to lead out on these discussions, but I hate seeing unused time. Well, and there's already two more hands up now. So we discussed this, I think it was 4 weeks ago, and then 2 weeks ago we had a follow-up discussion in the work meeting where the process that the administration went through to create these proposals was discussed, and I think that was a very, very helpful discussion. If I remember correctly, Mr. Parker, did make it clear that the presentation was on the process and not necessarily the merits of the proposals themselves. And as we try to explore some of that, so I actually a little surprised that this made it back onto our agenda so quickly. I do feel like we still could use some of that discussion, perhaps in a work meeting or even just through emails and discussion, just so I can understand the details a little bit more. Having had some of that discussion in the work meeting and whatnot, and having seen the parks level of service map or draft map, that was very helpful to me to understanding what the level of service is in the area around the proposed North Canyon Road Park. And so at this point, I'm comfortable, voting on that at this point. But I do hope that we'll continue to develop that level of service park map. There was some discussion on looking at it kind of from a population base. I also think it would be helpful to look at it from kind of a park area base as well. Not all parks are created equal. Some are quite large and some are quite small, and so we may want to give them different weight on that level of service map. But again, I'm comfortable going forward with the vote on that now, and not waiting for the level surface maps to become not draft form. And then as far as the 900,000 for West Side grocery recruitment, I've been here long enough to realize just how long this has been an issue for Provo, and I appreciate the mayor and for her making it such an emphasis during her time in office. And I think everyone knows I've been a big supporter of that effort as well. And if that 900,000 is what is necessary in order to make that happen and make that happen quickly, then I think it's money well spent. My concern, as I've raised previously, is if it's not needed. I do feel that if we are to appropriate it tonight, I can't imagine any proposal from a business that doesn't require $900,000 in order to pencil. We've all heard that term. We've all heard those pitches that, well, we need this TIF or we need whatever in order to make it pencil. And I'd be surprised if we appropriate it, that it's sitting there with an earmark saying this is to be used. I just can't imagine that we'll see any proposal that doesn't require that for it to make sense. So that's where my concern is. And so if we don't move forward with that aspect on it tonight, I'd be very interested in continuing the conversation about, how do we make it available if it's necessary, but not necessarily pre-commit it. So that's where I'm at on this.
Mr. Handley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just reiterate quickly what I've said in a previous setting. I think, we have an obligation to move forward on that Canyon Road Park, and I think it's the right thing to do. And I like the fact that we have to remember that all of this money helps other projects move up sooner in the docket as well. So I don't think it's a win-lose. I think there's an advantage that it ends up having, sort of downwind and downstream. And I know the Parks and Rec is vigilant about other upcoming opportunities. So I think this loosens up their ability to address those other needs and take care of something that I think is been demonstrated already is good for that area of the city, and was something that was negotiated under some duress. And with regard to the grocery store, I think I'm thinking along similar lines, and that is that, you know, we need a grocery store in the southeast as well. You know, I don't favor sort of pitting one neighborhood against another. I think actually maybe there's a way in which addressing the need in the west allows the administration and the city to focus on the southeast as well, almost simultaneously once there's that opportunity developing in the west. And I would, in light of what Mr. Harding was saying, I would just encourage the administration, and I think I have the confidence in them to do this, and that is to just use that money as wisely as possible and recognize that, you know, if it helps to negotiate with someone to say the council's pretty eager to spend that money in the southeast as well on a grocery store or someplace else in the city that's needed. So, you know, it's not as if it's a blank check or a $900,000 check flat. So I'm ready to support both tonight.
Councilor Ellsworth.
Yeah, I was curious what we think the line items might be for the $900,000.
Mr. Maury or Mr. Paxman, who's going to answer that, or both?
Oh, go ahead, Keith.
Sorry, we're trying to unmute. I guess I wanted to make a couple of comments about this. First of all, I'm really pleased that we're having this conversation all together, because I think it shows our progressive and very aggressive interest in trying to get a grocery store on the west side. I think I'd like to clarify, I don't know that any of us have a specific line item for how that potential $900 could be spent. And I would hesitate to suggest a specific line item. I think what it does is it gives us flexibility as we try to accelerate and facilitate that kind of development on the west side, to use funds that typically we don't have at our disposal. I mean, typically right now we don't have any funds in our budget that we could use to try to encourage or to study a project like this at a level that might be needed. And so I hesitate to actually give a line item. I think I'd also like to help the council understand that any conversations that we have like this with any potential business about coming to the city, we always clarify with them that if there's a gap in a project, they're going to have to tell us what that gap is before we suggest some kind of opportunity that we may or may not have to try to help them bridge that gap. And so that's the kind of conversation we would have with any potential grocer on the west side, is first of all to try to get them to look at the property on their own. And then if there is a gap because there's infrastructure like they couldn't overcome on their own and make it marketable in a way that it could survive, we could utilize some of this potentially to help solve some of that problem. I don't think it's our responsibility to solve all of those problems, but to be able to participate in the solution, I think goes a long ways to showing the goodwill that we have in wanting that store to be successful in the long term. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I would hesitate to give a specific line item that we would want to spend that money on, because we don't know exactly what the issues could potentially be.
Thank you. Councilor Fillmore.
Just a couple of observations, Mr. Chairman. With respect to the North Canyon Park, I think we all acknowledge that the Edgemont area has a legitimate expectation that we move forward on this park, and if we can accelerate, even better. There really has been a gap in the Northeast in this regard, and with the controversy and the feelings and the sacrifice that was made when that park by Timpview High was sold to the school district, this is really much needed. And so I'm all in favor of accelerating that, and would simply make the point that, as is the case with many of our parks in Provo, they are used not just by people in the immediate neighborhood, They're used by people from all over Provo. And so it's a Provo park, nearly as much as it is the Northeast Park. With respect to the grocery store, I want to applaud the mayor's initiative in this. Somebody had to cut the Gordian knot and get some movement for the poor folks out in the west side who've been longing for a grocery store for many years. And I think allocating $900,000 with the hope that it won't all be necessary gives her and her economic development team the flexibility they need in the future to work out the best possible deal. And I have confidence in that team that they won't just give it away gratuitously. Also, comforted by the fact that any portion of that money not used will in fact come right back in the general fund for future projects, which will require the council's approval. So I don't think there's any further need for discussion beyond tonight. I would ask the council to keep in mind that we still have approximately $2 million left in the CARES Act fund, which are available for other projects. And my personal hope is that we can address some needs in the southeast quadrant of Provo, but that we can discuss that at a later date. So I'm also, I take note of the fact that there is in fact a major second wave of funding coming our way as a result of the federal government's recent second COVID funding effort, the $1.9 trillion. Funds will be coming into Provo, which will allow us a one-time opportunity to take care of some other projects. And so I'm not terribly concerned about this allocation tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fillmore. Mr. Maury, did you have a follow-on comment, or is this your hand up from before?
No, we actually did have a follow-up comment. We just wanted to assure the council that we're not exclusively focused on the west side, that we have had conversations about southwest and southeast Provo. We're having conversations with Albertsons, with Associated Foods, and we've reached out to Walmart, exploring possibilities. So it's not an exclusive community on the west side of the community.
And I think it's also fair to say that the conversations that we've been having on the west side grocery store have actually accelerated a little faster than we had hoped, which is a good thing. And that the prospect of being able to utilize funding to make sure that that keeps the momentum that it currently has could be really important.
Thank you. Appreciate that follow-up. I'll invite Mr. Shipley and Mr. Hoban, if you have a comment to make your first comments at this time. Mr. Shipley?
Yeah, I feel comfortable with the park, and most of it's me relying on the administration's suggestion, their prioritization, but also other counselors here with us that have been on the council longer than I have, and their feedback that this is something that we are committed to, and I can appreciate that. So I feel very comfortable with that. I live on the west side. I'm probably the only one here that really benefits from the grocer, personally, on the council, more than anybody else here, maybe. And a $900,000 blank check to do whatever to get a grocery store makes me a little uncomfortable. But I am comfortable with the fact that if it allows us to further infrastructure, if it allows us to further a land swap, if it allows us to potentially do something through public works that just needed to happen a little faster to facilitate this. I just think there are a lot of other things that could potentially happen, or that still can happen, with these dollars. And it's not a check that we're pre-writing to whatever grocer is the first one to sign up, for this area. At least I hope that. And I would be confident that we would negotiate through trying to just make the infrastructure happen quicker or more quickly to facilitate this, as opposed to just a check that we write basically to incentivize somebody to come out. So that's, the the finance side of me, is reluctant to sign off on something where there's so much flexibility, with how it can be used. But selfishly, as a West Sider, if they can be creative, and if this gives flexibility and leverage to negotiate, not to write a check to a grocer necessarily, but to specifically help with the infrastructure, to further that and speed that along in order to facilitate this. Because I do think, and maybe this is my main point about the grocer side and why I can support it. I do think that it is a race right now, specifically on the West Side, between ourselves and Orem now, to try to facilitate this as fast as possible and try to capture this as soon as possible. And we still might not get it soon enough, but I think this is our best effort. And if it facilitates some infrastructure that can be used for something else, even if we do lose in this contest, or this race, it won't be wasted infrastructure. So anyway, my long answer to I'm supportive for both, and I think I'm anxious for the discussions on the remaining, CIP funds as well, to look at other projects that we can benefit the city from.
Mr. Hoban. If you're talking, you're muted, Mr. Hoban.
Whoops, I guess I had to unmute my phone as well. Sorry about that. Yeah, I was just going to reiterate as well that I think there is a sense of urgency here, which is maybe why we're more apt to move forward not having all the details worked out. And I guess I just would ask the administration to just please be wise stewards with the money that they'll be provided, or the funds that we're providing, and know that, we'll be watching. But I think a grocery store on the West Side should be a priority for us. I think it will take drastic measures to try to make that happen. It hasn't happened for 22 years, I think. And so, we've got to take some drastic measures. So I'm supportive of it. I'm supportive of the park based on, similar to what Councilmember Shipley said, just relying on previous council members and the emphasis that they're kind of placing on that, we are committed to this and we need to move forward. So I'm supportive of both projects.
Thank you. Councilor Ellsworth.
Yeah, I didn't get a comment earlier. I just had that question, but I do agree with Mr. Shipley. Writing that big of a blank check makes me uneasy. And to reference Mr. Handley's comments earlier, I'd hate for the people that I represent in Southeast Provo to be used in some way as a pawn or a mechanism to leverage a grocery store elsewhere. So as supportive as I am of this opportunity for economic development, I hope that we do our homework, that we're very conscientious with how we use the public's funds, and that we look to benefit all areas of Provo as we move forward, so that we can lift all the boats in our city.
Thank you. Well, I guess I'll make my first comment now. One of the benefits of going last is I think my colleagues have pretty much said everything that I wanted to say. So I'll just say that I'm supportive of both of these items. Is there any further discussion? All right, we'll call for a vote then. Councilor Shipley.
Yes.
Councilor Ellsworth.
Yes.
Councilor Fillmore.
Yes.
Councilor Hoban.
Yes.
Councilor Handley.
Yes.
Councilor Harding.
Yes.
And I, Dave Sewell, will vote yes, making this a unanimous vote. And now, if there's no objection, we will adjourn the Provo Municipal Council meeting and reconvene as the Redevelopment Agency of Provo by unanimous consent. I'll turn the gavel over to Councilor Ellsworth and just remind her that this is the last item, and feel free to close the meeting when we're done with that.
You got it. So we are on agenda item 9, which is a resolution authorizing the chief executive officer to sign an assignment agreement and an amendment to the existing lease agreement with Liberty George Provo LLC for a parking structure in Provo Town Square. Does anyone want to present on this?
Yes, ma'am. If I could just diverge for a moment here. So I know that it's been an item of much concern with the public and with the council, but I would just like to announce that we've been working closely with the potential buyers of the mix, and they closed today. So the deeds were recorded, and we anticipate that the funds will be transferred first thing tomorrow morning, but the escrow closed today. And we do have demolition permits in for the demolition of the Shopko building later on this week. So we're very, very optimistic that we're going to finally have some positive movement on this project. Thank you for letting me sidetrack for a moment. This item tonight is concerning the parking garage at Provo Town Square. And just for a little bit of background, this parking garage was put together with assistance from the Redevelopment Agency, not only in terms of land, but also in terms of the cash investment. In 1991, through a ground lease and joint development agreement, we currently have a lease on the property, not on the structure. The structure is owned by the owners of the Provo Town Square building, but on the land for 50 years. So this, with 2 20-year extensions at the option of the lessor. 2 10-year? I'm sorry, 2 10-year. So for a total, so currently we would go until 2041. If they invoke the option, it would go to 2061. The agreement required the property owner to maintain 200 spaces in the garage, 50 of which were to be available for the public. And they also required them to go ahead and maintain and operate the structure. And we did give the owner of the parking structure the right to install traffic access as well as charge rates. In 2004, we transferred the property to a new owner, and subsequent to that, the owner has been complacent and has not reinvested in the structure as much. Tonight, we're asking you to consider amending and assigning that lease to Liberty George Provo. They are property developers that are out of Southern California. They have come to Provo to take a look at opportunities here. And they believe that this is an underutilized asset in the downtown, specifically because it sits on the corner of University and Center Street, really being the heart of downtown Provo and of Provo in general. They have plans to take over the structure and to make some immediate improvements to the structure so that they can begin to be more broadly utilized by the public. And then they will also continue to make improvements to the Provo Town Square building itself. We had kind of asked for, when we put together the agreement, we had parking as well as our legal department go through it with us. We've made some amendments, and we're asking, and an assignment to that. We are confident that Liberty George Provo, which is the entity that's been created for this, is going to be an active participant in the downtown and to maintain the structure in a manner that befits our area. They're expected to close within the month. So by the end of the month, they are anticipating closing on the structure. So that is the reason we'd asked for this item to be on the agenda tonight. Without the assignment, we do have representatives of Liberty George, Ryan Smith of Urban George Properties, as well as Mr. Patrick Walbsey, I believe, are both on the line and are available to answer questions if you'd like. But their timing some of the funding that they're using has a time constraint, and they're looking to invest this property into our community. So.
But I'd add to David's comment. I think he did a very thorough review of the history on this project. I think this is a critical portion of the downtown environment. I think it's been neglected for a period of time, and we really haven't seen the opportunity there that it presents for itself. We're frankly very excited. We've had multiple meetings with the company that's talking about purchasing the property. I think their vision for what they want to do is holds to the tradition of the downtown environment and to the history of that building itself. They were the first ones to call out to us the neglected condition of the parking structure and the building itself, and their desire to improve that to be in harmony with the advancement of the Provo downtown environment. And so we've been working, aggressively. David's got a mountain of paperwork here in front of him that we've been working through. He's been working through. Javin and Gary have been working through. Camille has been working through from our legal department to help us try to negotiate with them terms that we felt were critical to Provo to maintain our position there, but also allowed them the flexibility to invest their money, improve the parking structure, and improve the Provo Town Square. So their timing is sensitive. We've tried to be responsive to that. And I think we've done that. I think we've been attentive to the needs and the concerns of the city and to our parking needs downtown. And we're anxious for you to recognize that effort and support this assignment so that they can go ahead and close on the property at the end of this month.
Thank you. Does the council have any questions for the staff before we open this item for public comment? Okay, we'll go ahead and open this this item for public comment. Mr. Shipley, did you want to ask your question now or in a minute?
If I could, thank you.
Go ahead.
Took me a minute. I just wonder if there's a cost to undo the current lease. Is there a cost or something I'm just not seeing? I mean, I see the contract for the next lease, but to get out of the current, do we have some buyout or anything like that we have to accomplish? I don't believe that there is. There was the original ground lease contemplated giving them the option to buy the property from us at a certain point in time, but that was never exercised. I'm sorry. I don't see that the agreement's contemplated to us to buy out the property. Mr. McGinn may be more familiar with that, so.
Yes. Mr. McGinn, did you have information on that question?
Yeah, the agreements didn't contemplate, and the deal didn't contemplate that we would buy the structure from them. It was always, the deal was always structured such that to make it work, we owned the ground. They built a structure on the ground that we owned. And the structure was an integral part of the town square itself. And so where the restaurants are and the buildings are, they need the parking for that. The only ability that we had to actually perhaps go in and get the structure from them was if they defaulted and didn't maintain the structure like the lease agreement, the ground lease. You gotta remember, we only own the property and we're literally just leasing the property to them. And so we actually, a couple of years ago, started going down that road pretty aggressively, contemplating should we declare a default. That would have required some litigation. In the meantime, the current owner who's about to sell or wants to sell to this new ownership group expressed interest in selling and just being out of it. And we were very concerned about taking over a parking facility that we would now own that's now divorced in control and management from the Town Square Center itself and what that could possibly do to a new owner who would come in. A situation like this, typically your financing would probably be dependent on having control and management of that parking facility for the large building and tenants that you would have. And they're on the phone tonight, and I'm sure they could address that more of how important it is for their deal. But there wasn't a way for us to buy them out. And also my memory with the agreement is we have the right to agree to an assignment, but that agreement can't be unreasonably withheld. And so it's really basically the same terms as before. We have modified a couple of things. They have put in a provision that's specifically related to parking, where they agree to, in the future, cooperate with us on parking and the operation of things. And we're very appreciative and grateful to them. And our conversations with them, I think we have a similar vision for how things would operate downtown. But there was never a provision where we could just come in and say, we're buying this structure.
And if I may follow up to that, is there a sense, if we have some of these spots with other lease agreements that we have in the downtown, that there's any way to assure that there'll be public access at a reasonable cost? Because, and this is why I ask, because if I own a building like this and it's mostly my employees, I give them all a pass, right? A pass where they get into parking for free because they work for me or because they are tenants. And then to the public, I might charge $10 or $20 or $30, not because I need any revenue, but just because I want to basically maintain the lot's access for my people, not the public. And I guess I worry, and maybe I don't understand the lease agreement well enough to speculate on this, but it lends itself, I guess, to easily manipulate in for the benefit of the owner in a way that just doesn't give us any public access at all.
And that's very true. And when we come back on the 30th, I think we have a study session on parking, and I want to talk about the structures and what we have. While we do have the right to have public parking, all of those agreements don't give us control of that parking. The owner of the structure has control of it, and they can typically charge what they want. So you can say, well, yeah, you have right to have the public here, but we're going to charge $500 a day. But you need to remember, these agreements weren't set up and contemplated when they were done to provide Provo City to own and operate these structures for the public. We need to work with the owners and operators of the structures in a very cooperative way so that hopefully they see the benefit of what we're trying to accomplish for the public, and that they join in, and we can get everyone to agree. And that will be a lot of work, but it's something we've been working on, and we're pretty far down the road with this group and with the Marriott group for that. And they can address that in more depth. Having met with them, I feel very confident that their vision of what they're trying to accomplish aligns with ours. The more they can have the public use that facility, and it's safe and it's well lit and it functions well and people understand how to use it, will just help them with their future plans of what they're trying to accomplish. And the more people we can get downtown, and part of that being parking, making sense, it's better for everyone.
And I think too, Councilman Shipley, to go along with that, there's a huge portion of the Provo Town Square that's specifically designed for retail and commercial use. And so to your point about could they potentially elevate the pricing on that parking or only make it available to their tenants, I think if they were to do that, it would potentially impact anybody that was coming to eat at their restaurants or use the other commercial and retail opportunities. And so I think that disincentivizes them to do that. I mean, to some extent, we have to allow them to monetize the parking in that structure so that they can maintain it, which obviously hasn't been done in the past. But I think market issues will drive what that pricing is so that their potential patrons of the retail and the commercial still have access to that.
Mr. Shipley, does that answer your questions? Okay. Are there any other questions for staff before we proceed to public comment? All right. At this point, let's open this item for public comment.
Quinn Peterson, go ahead and unmute yourself, state your name, city of residence, and you'll have 2 minutes to make your comment.
Hey, this is Quinn Peterson. Can you guys hear me all right?
Yes.
So I think every person on this screen, I've been blowing up your phone this evening on this topic. So hopefully you're ready to just hear a little bit longer. It's also been a really long day, so I hope you have some energy to really take some critical thinking into this topic. As a lot of you know, I started my whole journey with downtown in the Provo Town Square building. I ran the unhinged retail space for 5 years, and I worked with the property owner, and I had a lot of good and bad experiences, and it really kind of exposed me to the potential of the downtown, because that is the heart of our downtown. This project specifically, with this parking structure, is currently an enormous blight in our downtown. It's got busted lighting, the gate's been broken for years, it's all public free parking right now because everything's broken and unmaintained. They've got sewage back up in the basement. It's an atrocious project that's been neglected because the owner of the property lives in Bali, and he does not manage the structure. It's a huge misuse in our downtown. The reason that I'm so fired up about this is because we were kind of under the impression this would kind of be an easy transition and we could get this taken care of. This is the fourth property owner that's tried to buy this project, and they're by far the best option. We already have 2 LOIs for people that are moving in. This group is ready to revitalize the entire property, to bring in new businesses. We have 2 more that we've been showing spaces to that are going to come down. There's a lot to still work on, but this group is ready to come in, repair the gates, repair the sewage pumps, the lights, everything that needs to be done. If we continue this, we will lose this opportunity. The funding has a deadline. They will be out of contract and they will not be able to get the property. We need to vote tonight.
Thank you, Quinn. Is there anyone else who wishes to make a comment on this item? Please either use the raise hand feature on the computer, or doesn't look like we have any phone callers on at this time. Ms. Ellsworth, it doesn't look like we have any more comments.
Okay. Did any party to the lease or agreement want to comment? It looks like Mr. Ryan Smith has his hand raised.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity for having us on your agenda for this busy evening. My name is Ryan Smith. I'm one of the principals of the ownership entity that right now is in escrow to acquire the Provo Town Square property. And I just want to reiterate what Quinn was talking about and some of the other comments we heard tonight about how excited we are about really being able to come in and really revitalize what we think is a very important piece of property within the city of Provo. We spent a lot of time with David, Keith, and a lot of other members within the city. And I think we really have a great alignment of interest in terms of what we want to do to bring a much higher level of operation and vision to an unpolished gem within the city of Provo. It was actually great and very inspiring to hear a lot of the city residents tonight talk about how excited they were about some of the preservation efforts for some of the treasures and resources of Provo. We think that Provo Town Square is one of those treasures, and we really want to be able to come in, use the capital that we've put together and funded to, again, spend significant dollars to not only improve the property and its position within the market, but also take care of that parking garage. We know that's a critical piece, not only to our property and bringing visitors and guests into the businesses that we have there and plan to put there, but also in really working with the overall city and the downtown community to really make sure that that's an added and valued asset that we can make sure is a critical part of what we're trying to do there. So everything from signage to cleanliness to safety to lighting, those are all important things that we think really drive visitors to come to the garage, to come to the businesses downtown, and also to certainly come to the property that we're looking to invest significant amount of capital in. Just to touch on one of the questions regarding the lease, we do have an obligation to provide 50 spaces open to the public at prevailing market rates. So we can't come in and just charge $500 a day for a parking space. We do have to allow 50 of those spaces to be used for just general public use. And we have to charge what effectively every other parking garage is charging for those spaces, which as of today, there's really no market to charge for transient parking. And that's what we plan on doing. Again, our focus is really to provide a clean, safe environment and drive traffic to the garage, not make it prohibitive for visitors and guests to want to come to our property and to downtown. So happy to answer any other questions for you. I think we've got a great property, a great city that we've been working with, and we're super excited about what we're going to do in conjunction to make that a real jewel and gem of Provo. Thank you for having us.
Mr. Paxman, you have your hand up.
Yeah, Dixon Holmes wasn't able to get his raise hand function to work, so if we could turn the moment to him, that'd be great.
Sure.
Thank you, Council. Just want to share my perspective. When I was first put into economic development in 2000, in fact, it was 2000, right before the Olympics, the Economic Development and the Redevelopment Agency office were located right above Black Sheep Cafe. That's where our offices were, and we used this parking space. At the time, Provo Town Square and the parking deck were owned by a different property owner, and when the current property owner purchased it, they were at the time located in Napa. We were told that they had grand plans, and for a while they did, and it functioned very well. But remember, back in the early 2000s, we didn't have Wells Fargo, we didn't have Zions, we didn't have the New Skin Edition as it sits now. So a lot of these, this is one of the first parking decks, or one of the few parking decks in town that wasn't owned by the county or the state. So over time, the property, again, as was pointed out, was maybe not as well maintained as it could have been. It was hard to negotiate with the current owner. And again, looking to a new owner who seems to be engaged and anxious to be a part of our community and to make this viable, I think speaks volumes. Again, as someone who used the facility frequently and officed in that area, we saw the vacancies and hoped for better uses. And so if there's an opportunity that we have someone else who can engage us, who can be a part of our community, I would hope that would be considered strongly and move this forward and make it the asset that it could be. So just if you have any additional questions on that, I'd be happy to answer if there were any.
Thank you. All right, back to the council. Are there any questions or any discussion on the item? Mr. Harding.
Thank you, Chair Ellsworth. It's been a long day and it's getting late. So I'm trying to, I don't want to say anything that I'm going to regret later. I want to be fair as well. And I guess I'm a little upset that we're hearing about this tonight. We didn't even have a work meeting discussion on it. We're told that we have to approve this now, or this is pretty much the last time that we can. This is our last opportunity to approve this, or we jeopardize the entire sale and all of this that people apparently have been working on for a long time. But I'm becoming aware of this last Thursday when these documents were made available. We haven't walked through what the lease adjustments, amendments are. It sounds like a wonderful buyer that will want to be a part of our community, and I don't begrudge the buyer in the least. We're talking about how market forces will guide the effective use of these properties, where we have 20, 30 years of experience, or 40 years of experience, where much of that it has not been used effectively. We've talked about that the current owner who is in Bali, he hasn't always been in Bali, and it wasn't well run previous to this. This was the evidence, that's not the right word for it, but this was the first evidence that was pointed to at why we needed a functioning full-time parking coordinator. It was this garage and the garage across the street, at how the city had entered into these contracts. These contracts were not being honored by the other by the other parties, but we were not following up with it because it just wasn't anyone's responsibility. So I'm really struggling with this, but at the same time, I don't want to jeopardize the deal that is in place. But some of the changes to the agreement, there's the new leasee will not be responsible for any problems caused by the non-maintenance of the previous party. Right now, the current leasee is responsible for these things, and that the maintenance that hasn't been taken is a potential problem for the city, and has been a problem for the use of that facility, and the public has not received the benefit from the investment that we have made in both the land and in the structure itself. But right now, that is a bigger liability against the current owner. But if we go ahead and approve this agreement, all of that liability is wiped away, and the new leasee doesn't have that. Which makes sense from the leasee that's coming in, and perhaps the arrangement that has been made with the new leasee that I think is referred to in Appendix B, which we don't have. Maybe that makes sense, but I have not been informed of what that entails. There's in the current agreement, looks like there's a reserve fund that's supposed to be maintained. We're dropping that requirement. Parking fees, there's some changes to that. The creation of a parking district. That's actually what we said we were going to do 5 years ago, and have been saying for 5 years that we wanted to move in that direction. But I believe these amendments basically say that there's some commitments there, and I believe there's a whole lot of detail that I once was brought up to speed on, at least part of, that I've forgotten in the past 5 years. But if I remember, with this one, there's there was talk of creating a parking district, and then there were certain things that would happen with this parking garage. And we were talking about the operation and maintenance of the garage, and I think I can't remember, but I think this one might have been where if a parking district was created, then that parking district would manage the parking, and that's the direction that the council has voted to move in and reconfirmed that. But now we're saying we're dropping that requirement, and so again, and then all of this, I have not caught wind at all about this until Thursday when there's this legal document that I guess we're asked to approve. So that's where I'm having a hard time with this. But if we continue it tonight, then we jeopardize the deal, and I don't want to do that either. So I feel like I'm kind of boxed into a corner with this.
Thank you, Mr. Harding. Mr. Fillmore. Oh, we need to unmute you.
I'm sorry, my unmute button froze. So I do want to make a couple of comments on this. Speaking from the perspective of the Economic Development Committee, this is a very good deal for the city. It has multiple benefits for downtown Provo, continues the ongoing rejuvenation of our downtown district. It's certainly not something we want to lose. I appreciate Mr. Handley's concerns. It certainly would have been better if this matter had been raised with the council even a couple of weeks ago. Personally, I'm not aware of any significant problems with the lease in its current form. It's about to be assigned. I'm very sensitive to what Quinn Peterson has shared with us on behalf of DPI. I just don't want any vague, imprecise concerns about the garage to be the tail that wags this dog. It's just too good of a project to pass up, and if we can, I'd like to see it approved tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Fillmore. Other councilors, what comments or questions do you have? Mr. Sewell.
So I share the concerns that it would have definitely been nice to have more notice about this. On the other hand, I have a great deal of trust in the ability of our economic development team, Keith Morey and David Walter and Dixon Holmes, to recognize a good deal when they see it, and Bill Fillmore for that matter. I found the comments from Quinn Peterson and the representative of forgot the name of the entity, persuasive. And so I'm not inclined to jeopardize the deal. The only, we haven't had everybody weigh in yet, but if we end up split down the middle on this, and I don't know if we will, but I just would like to throw out the idea of a special session, possibly, if that would allow us to meet the deadline and address everyone's concerns.
That's a great option. We haven't heard from, there's Mr. Handley.
I'll just chime in and say I'm ready to vote, and I'm ready to vote in favor.
All right. Do we have any comments from Mr. Hoban?
Sorry. No, I'm a little bit torn here, but I guess I better get to my conclusion quickly.
Mr. Fillmore, do you have another comment? Uh-oh, we got to unmute you again.
I'm wondering if it might be helpful to give Keith Morey and or Quinn Peterson one last word to maybe address some of the concerns that have been raised.
We can do that. Let's go to Mr. Shipley first.
So my biggest concern is public access. It's a public owns the ground, right? And one of the benefits of owning the ground is being able to enter a lease arrangement like this and offer public parking. That's what's negotiated. That was the purpose, I think, initially. And so my concern that, that parking will truly be public, there will be public access for that parking. I feel persuaded that it will be, that the motivation of the new owner will align with what we want from this property, which is getting cars in that lot safely, to be able to, go to these downtown businesses. And because I feel persuaded that that purpose will be served, I think we shouldn't stand in the way of a deal that is good in other ways. And I would say no to it and stop the deal if I thought that it couldn't serve the public good and wouldn't allow for these, this public asset to be used by the public. But I feel convinced that it will be used by the public and be better served for the public. So I can vote yes on this tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Shipley. Real quick, let's go to Mr. Holmes or Mr. Morey if they had any comments to respond to Mr. Fillmore.
Sure. Well, to all the council members, I feel badly if you feel like this is happening very quickly. It's happening quickly for us too, frankly. Projects like this sometimes move a little more quickly than we have the opportunity to respond to with our normal notification requirements for city council meetings and things of that sort. So we've tried to accommodate that by talking about this with the redevelopment committee, and then working through doing the research that we needed to as staff to get it to a point where we felt like we'd addressed the concerns that we knew that you would have. Some of the questions that revolved around the reserve fund that existed prior to this purchase were amended in the agreement because the purchaser was concerned that because that reserve fund had not been maintained by previous owners in the past, requiring them to create a reserve fund and make the improvements that would be needed to bring the parking structure up to what's an appropriate standard of operation, made that difficult for them to accomplish. And so we agreed that the past reserve fund that was not in place, we would amend that to allow them to make the improvements with their commitment that they would build a reserve fund going forward in the way that it should have been operated historically, but frankly wasn't. So I hope that answers some of your concerns. I mean, we tried to be attentive to the lease agreement items that were important to the city when we entered into this agreement to begin with, but also allowed a purchaser to take over the property and make improvements without being hamstrung by past poor performance, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Harding, did you have a comment?
Yeah, just some responses to some of the things that have been said, and try to organize my thoughts a little bit. If anyone took what I said to indicate that I was not planning to vote for this, I miscommunicated. I feel like there's no choice but to vote for it, but I'm not happy with kind of the circumstances under which we're learning about this. I am not a lawyer. I do not fully understand contracts and languages. And so often when we look at assigning and amending contracts, often, we'll have someone walk through what, if we approve something, what that means and what that will do. And besides me just kind of walking through a couple things there with my, trying to understand what these phrases and what these paragraphs are saying. I mean, any other counselor feel like you have read through and fully understand what this agreement and what these amendments will do? We're being asked to approve it. Does anyone feel like they fully understand what is in this proposal, what we're approving? And I don't mean to put people on the spot now, but I do think we do have some duty to independently review some of these things. Again, I'm going to be voting for this. I don't feel like I have any other choice. Everything I've heard of this new leasee, the new buyer, I'm excited, and it sounds like they're saying everything, saying all the right things, and I hope they follow through with all that, and I hope that they're willing to work with the city, on all of these things, and I wish them the best, and hope they're wildly successful. And I totally understand why they would request some of these changes, and I think it totally makes sense from their perspective. It was said earlier in a couple different ways, like what happens if the garage was separated from this property, or what would happen, but I think if something like that were to happen, it then decreases the overall value of the property. And if the seller, who has apparently not performed the maintenance that they should, it's the current owner that has caused some of these problems, but by allowing this sale to go forward like this, we're basically wiping away all of those consequences. We're not, understandably, we're not requiring the buyer to pick those up, but it's just I think it's the overall public that loses out on what the previous or current owner should have been doing all along. But we wipe away all those consequences because we allow it to be sold at a price of what it should be if the maintenance had occurred, and if there had been a reserve fund and all of these things. So I think there may have been other ways to go about this that would have held the current owner a little bit more responsible for not following through with what they were obligated to do under this current contract. With that said, with the timing and all of that, I don't feel like there's much choice other than moving forward and hoping that with the deal that has been negotiated at this point. But I hope that in the future that these conversations, whether that's the RDA board reaching out to the rest of the council or whatever, but I'm just not happy how this all played out. But at the same time, I don't see much choice other than approving this tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Harding. I'll just say that the RDA Executive Board did not have this depth of information. I had very little information in our previous meetings. Mr. Shipley.
Just a question for future reference that I thought of while Mr. Harding was talking, and that is, does the city not have the legal right to lien the property based on an obligation with a lease like this? I mean, can't we attach some kind of lien because we're providing, they were supposed to do something, and in a personal residence, if somebody doesn't fulfill a commitment, there can be a lien on that property, a legal lien, where if they sell the property, it has to be released first prior to the new buyer, taking ownership. And I just wonder if there's any right for the city to accomplish. I mean, maybe this is a discussion for another setting, but it would make me feel more comfortable to have these lease agreements if we could somehow have some, lien that would have to be released prior to because the seller should be the one, right, to compensate the city for the public not getting any benefit from this property value that we've allotted to them over this time. But there's no way at this point, now that the sale is going through, for us to collect on that or have any legal repercussion. But I just wonder or recourse, excuse me, but I just wonder if we could have assigned something, if there's anything legally that we can do to try to, put any backbone into these lease agreements going forward.
Mr. Jones, did you have a response for that?
Sure, I'll chime in, and then I don't know if Gary McGinn wants to speak to it as well. Since he mentioned the prior efforts to enforce these agreements, or at least the strategy sessions around those. I wasn't involved in those, and really haven't seen these documents as far to address it from a case-specific standpoint. So, but I guess as a generality, it's possible. You've got to go to the court and prove that they did not, in fact, do what they were supposed to do, and get the court to order the lien on that basis. But it is at least theoretically possible in that sense.
I think this is a larger discussion for another day. Part of the problem is some of the leases that we're dealing with were made, with the Marriott back in the 80s. This one is in the 90s. And the purpose for the lease, while there was to allow public parking, it wasn't the overall overriding goal of it to have a unified parking plan. And we'll get into that more. That's one of the things I do want to talk about are all the leases we have, what we can do and what we can't do. Typically in this lease, it was we could declare a default and at some point through litigation, actually take back the structure at some point. And 3 years ago, as we were discussing this and going, or 4 years ago when we were discussing this and going forward, what we decided was the property owner at the time, the whole thing was open to the public. The gates weren't working. It wasn't being charged. The public could park there, and we put up signage, and we did cooperatively work with the current owner for those types of things. But to come in and make improvements and things like that to the structure, we hadn't made a decision yet for that. One of the big concerns also was the current owner has wanted to get out of the ownership of the town square. And part of that asset was the parking garage. And knowing how these things work, one of the things that we wanted to do was allow a new owner who was coming in to be able to use this for their project. We also have the situation where we take over the parking. It's on our land. It's disconnected with the project. The project is supposed to have parking with it. And now we own all the parking, and it makes it very difficult to get financing for a purchase of a project where you have zero parking. And that's a really difficult thing to do. And so these agreements, there frankly are some limited things that as a city we can force. And some of them we can't set how much parking is. Or if we do, parking has to be the market rate. But I don't know what the market rate is in the area. So legally, there's many, many problems with these lease agreements. and what we can do with them. One of the typical things that the lease agreements do say is we won't object if the council creates a parking district or authority. Well, that's great, but what that objection really means, or not objecting, is that the city could go in and tax all of the property owners an extra tax in that area to pay for parking services. It doesn't give us the right to take back the parking structure and run and maintain it and operate it. They still own that parking structure, subject to the terms of our lease agreement. But these lease agreements and where we go forward from here is probably in new ones that we might do, and for redevelopment and economic development, probably is a discussion for a future day, because it's a long discussion.
Yeah, and I can appreciate that, I guess. And this is me thinking out loud. I think if you have an owner who's not upkeeping, it might be because their property is not performing, right? And financially, they might not have the resources, or at least want to have the resources to upkeep the property if it's not performing. If we have legal right to lien the property based on a breach of contract with a lease, then we're aligning their want to sell the property and profit from the property with our ability to recoup a public loss, a monetized public loss that occurred because of that lease. And so, I'm just, again, a new thought to me, but if Brian says that if theoretically even it could be a possibility, I want us to explore, the ability to put a lien on a property for an owner who's breached contract with the city, and not force them to pay at that point, right? The issue is then we just line it up with when they sell the property, they make us whole, and they make it more appealing to the new owner, right? Because we'll have recouped some costs that we then can put into the property prior to that new owner taking ownership. So anyway, bigger discussion, but if it's even a theoretical possibility, I would love us to explore.
And I think we could do that, but we need to make sure that those provisions get into our leases in the future. My memory is we didn't have that lease provision in this case. And we can go back and double check that. It was merely a default and pushing it to default, and now we have it.
The original lease gave us, we do have, we can bring an action against them for specific performance.
Okay. Thank you. I'm just going to add my comments. I suspect that this is a good deal for downtown Provo. We usually do right by people named Ryan Smith in Provo. But like Mr. Harding, I'm uncomfortable with the way this transpired. The council's job is to make legislative decisions, and I don't feel that we had enough information or enough time to adequately vet this idea. So hopefully in the future, we can bring these to the council or to the redevelopment agency with more time and more information so that everyone feels comfortable and we're not up against a wall having to make a decision on the last day possible. That's how I feel, but I am generally supportive of this deal for downtown. Are there any other comments from the council? Okay, are there any motions on this item? I'm sorry, we don't need a motion. We will go to the implied motion. Unless there's any objection. Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All right, Mr. Shipley.
Yes.
Mr. Hoban.
Yes.
Mr. Handley.
Yes.
Mr. Harding.
Yes.
Mr. Fillmore.
Yes.
Mr. Sewell.
Yes.
And I will vote yes. So the vote is unanimous in favor of this authorization. All right. Seeing there's no more business, we can adjourn unless there is an objection. All right, we will adjourn by unanimous consent. Thank you, everyone.